lot of your framework-y type
Wait,
stuff
who was Meg?
misses the point in kind of one regard, which is that their critique is basically like a value statement about what I should or should not care about in terms of impacts. So it's like whether or not you get to evaluate your foreign political engagement, et cetera, also begs the question of if the things that you're attempting to preserve are valuable. So the role of the ballot that you have posited for me and that they have largely agreed with is that I should endorse the form of engagement with democratic engagement with the Middle East that's best. So your form of democratic engagement with the Middle East is one that says that I should attempt to eradicate the Islamophobia and that I should attempt to prevent conflicts that would cause human extinction. So kind of the entire debate then begs the question of the death stuff and the suffering stuff, and a lot of the framework stuff is like largely irrelevant in that regard, with a couple of slight exceptions that I'll sort of discuss in a minute. So I think that the place where the negative wins the clearest offense in my mind is on this victimization argument. I think that throughout the debate, you never really answer the fundamental claim that static identities are the prerequisite for oppression, suffering, genocide, violence, etc. That if I can't define me and you as separate entities, and if I'm instead just existing in fluid sensuousness, then I'm obviously not doing violence and fucking with people because I'm just being sensuous, according to them. And so I think that part of the critique is never really contested. That part of it was pretty clear to me from the 2NC on, although admittedly not as clear in the 1NC. So there's a few link arguments that they've identified that I don't think that you really deal with properly. The first is this sort of intellectual capital argument that you sort of use other people's suffering as a form of intellectual capital to sort of win this argument, that you deploy other people's suffering in a way. And that's sort of an external intervention disad, which they explain in terms of their like Bosnia-Iraq thing, they justify other people's suffering to then use violence. That argument seems sort of a little bit external. The second is just that you define people as suffering, that there's nothing inherent that says that I have to see them as suffering, that they have to see themselves as suffering, but that you instead say there are people, Muslims in this particular context who are oppressed, discriminated against, etc. And that's problematic because it then means that you've defined those people in an antagonistic relationship with the existing political community. And that prevents them from ever really creating consensus because they have to always hold on to that historical resentment against the suffering that you've said has been caused against them. And so then your sort of response to this is to say, well, we eliminate that discrimination, and we say we should see these people as part of our community. But that sort of gets back into their like liberal subject bad sort of argument that when you include those people in the community, that reaffirms the idea that there is a community that we can define as being a stable, liberal, peaceful community, and that allows us to then find other scapegoats of sorts to define as being outside of that community and antagonistic, and that as long as we keep defining identity in that way, given the sort of initial root cause internal link claim, as long as they want to link that you keep creating those sort of stable identities and trade off with the ability to just fluidly exist in my sensuousness, then we'll continue those same sort of politics that cause violence. So it's not necessarily an alternative per se, but if I view things differently, then the impetus for those impacts goes away, is the way that they articulate it in that sense. So that sort of seems to be a turn to the argument, because I don't really understand. Your sort of response throughout the debate is just kind of, no, we solved that because we challenged Islamophobia, but there's not really a discussion that goes a step further of that and how that prevents future violence, how that challenges the underlying system of defining unstable identities that they've explained as the root cause of violence. The second thing that I think is problematic is that they sort of internal link turn some of your valuable life stuff. But this is the place where I think you all are doing a little bit better. So I think that you all definitely win the logical claim that if I exist, there are certain things about existing that are inherently good. And, they're even sort of your evidence, sort of your, Casu evidence sort of speaks to their sensuousness business. And it's like, if it's true that there's just things I can enjoy about existing, the fluidity of existence and letting things go, that's only possible if I'm alive in the first place. But I think that the problem is they want to link that your attempt, your fixation on continuing the biological existence trades off of that. And this is their sort of example about surviving by locking yourself in a safe deposit box. That it's like, yes, you avoid death, but you also are dead because you're not actually living and you're not just enjoying what exists because you're so constantly fixated. And they sort of have some evidence that contextualizes this in terms of catastrophic apocalyptic scenarios. It indicates that it's not just a question of being fixated with the fact that my life is finite, but getting fixated on all of these sort of catastrophic things that are being thrown around as, you know, grand threats to society is also something that trades off of my ability to enjoy life as it exists. Now, I think that the place where you all are doing the best is differentiating my valuing of my own individual life to my valuing of other people's lives. So your Macy evidence says that, well, it might be true that, you know, I shouldn't just be purely fixated on my own existence, that there is value in trying to preserve other people's existence. And the way that you all articulate this is basically just saying that I shouldn't make the decision for them. That you make an argument that if I allow these people to die, then I've prevented their ability to experience whatever it is that they find in life that makes it valuable. The problem is that there's sort of like an internal link chain missing of why is it that I should care and orient myself towards other people? Why is it that I should make attempts to preserve other people's biological existence, etc., if that comes at the expense of my own sensuousness and value of life? And your Macy evidence, the part that I think that you don't explain quite as well, but that is still sort of there, basically makes an argument that it's valuable to have that frame because it generates compassion. That if I think in terms of what can I do to preserve societal existence and not in terms of what I can do to preserve my own existence, that causes me to care about other people and creates like empathy. But I think that the problem is that they sort of, from the two ends beyond, are making an argument that internal link turns compassion. That your sort of static identity victimization part of the debate turns my ability to care about other people because it just becomes a form of narcissism as he describes it. And that sort of is more the intellectual capital part of it. I think that the thing I guess I sort of struggled with the most is just like, but a bunch of people are going to die if your like advantage is true. You know, you have sort of like a fairness argument that isn't really explicitly contested. It's like we get to evaluate our plan, we get to evaluate a world where it happens. So there's a world where a bunch of people don't die because we do the plan. But the part that just really needed to be connected is why I, as a judge, should orient myself making decisions in a way that does that. And I guess like part of the sort of connection is like is what this kind of comes back then to the role of the ballot. The role of the ballot is a form of democratic engagement with the Middle East. Is your form of democratic engagement with the Middle East that says that I should prioritize saving other people by preventing a conflict in the Middle East, is that a valuable form of democratic engagement? And I think that the one part of the framework debate that does become sort of relevant is this Antonio argument, which I think kind of works well with a bunch of their other sort of value life paralysis type stuff, which is just that all of your evidence on the framework, as you explain it and extend it in 2AR, even if you're right about all of it, is all evidence about capabilities in the sense that, and not about motivations. So it's, if we, you know, can discuss these things in academic circles and understand them better, then we are better able to influence policy. We're better able to go take these things and effectuate change in the world. We're better able to go make things happen. But they have an argument that speaks to motivation that says when we're so constantly obsessed with all these problems outside of ourselves, that it becomes overwhelming, that every time we address one of these things, that there's something else, and that it essentially just becomes sort of, we kind of give up. We're like, oh, fuck, the world is fucked. There's always this other catastrophe that's coming. There's always this other war. There's always this other thing, and that causes paralysis. So even if your form of democratic engagement provides the tools for us to create better policy, that the values you attach to it, the way that you say that I should evaluate it, and the reasons you say that I should do it are in fact reasons that are so overwhelming and like impossible to actually deal with that they prevent me from actually doing anything and prevent me from actually experiencing life and valuing it. So there's some mitigation to your terminal impact as a result of that, as a result of sort of the compassion internal link turn, and as a result of the sort of turns the case causes intervention and violence arguments on the victim's part of the K. And then there's sort of an external value life dissent, which is the only thing to me that seems like it's the one thing that there's no real answer to that trade-off claim. That you have sort of a totally separate claim that's just like, well, if we're dead, that doesn't exist. But you don't really have an answer to the link claim that
constantly attempting to preserve the security of life means that I never enjoy it. So that's like the one sort of clear impact. It's helped by the fact that they use your own evidence against you, which I think that your experience in that sense does sort of say that the reason life is valuable is pleasure. And so even if I think you're right that death would prevent that, I also think that you would prevent that. I think that there's a better chance that their alternative, or that their other critique kind of turns the case and complicates your ability to solve the sort of people dying with a clearer value life